Martha Jameson stood quietly near the entrance of the boutique, her hands folded over a soft brown envelope. Her handmade shawl draped gently over her shoulders, and her thrift store sandals squeaked faintly on the marble floor. The store manager gave her a quick up and down, then said loud enough for other shoppers to hear, "We don't have a clearance section, ma'am." Laughter stirred nearby. Martha's cheeks flushed. She opened her mouth to explain, but the doors behind her opened, and a calm voice echoed, "Is there a problem with my wife?" Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. Martha Jameson was the kind of woman people often overlooked, until they needed someone steady. At 67, she lived in a modest brick home on the quiet white edge of Charleston, South Carolina. The garden out front, blooming with marigolds and tulips, was her pride. She'd spent most of her life as a school librarian, helping children fall in love with words they could barely pronounce. Retirement didn't slow her down. She volunteered 3 days a week at the senior center and baked banana bread for church socials on Sundays. She dressed simply. Cotton skirts, soft sweaters, always a touch of embroidery, sometimes her own. She wore her late mother's shawl, often the one with hand-stitched edges. People called her gentle, polite, even plain, and Martha didn't mind. She had long made peace with the idea that Grace didn't need an audience. Her husband, Richard, was another story. The town whispered about him. A quiet man with deep pockets and deeper discretion. A venture capitalist, some said. A tycoon, others guessed. But Martha never cared about the details. All she knew was that he loved her with the same patience. He used to rebuild small companies and quietly steer big decisions. To the world, he was sharp and reserved. But at home, he smiled when she hummed while cooking and left sticky notes with bad puns on the bathroom mirror. That morning, she had found a note in the kitchen, tucked beside her teacup. "Today, buy something for yourself. Anything you want. Just show them this." The note was folded around a sleek black credit card she'd never seen before. It was their anniversary. 41 years since they'd eloped under a crescent moon and shared leftover cake in a motel room. Richard rarely suggested shopping, so the request made her heart flutter with equal parts nerves and excitement. She picked the boutique carefully. It was one of those upscale places downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows, soft piano music, and employees who looked like they walked off magazine covers. Richard had once mentioned the shop's owner at a dinner party. That was enough for Martha. She arrived early, the note and card tucked carefully in an envelope. Her sandals made soft sounds as she stepped inside. She paused by the door, her eyes scanning displays of silk scarves, velvet blouses, and glinting jewelry. For a moment, she forgot her nerves. Then came the voice. "Ma'am," the manager called sharply from behind the counter, her tone clipped. "This isn't a browsing zone. If you need directions or assistance, the food court is across the street." Martha blinked, unsure. She clutched the envelope tighter, stepped forward, and softly replied, "Actually, I'm here." But she never got to finish. The manager cut her off with a chuckle. "Of course you are." A few heads turned. One woman whispered, and someone else snorted. Shame crawled up Martha's neck. Her fingers trembled, and then, just as her lips parted to try again, the door chimed behind her. A slow hush spread through the store. The boutique was suddenly quiet, but Martha barely turned. Her eyes stayed on the manager, whose smile widened with smug amusement. "Let's not make this uncomfortable," the woman said, in a voice that pretended to be gentle but rang with condescension. "Our clients come here expecting a certain environment." Martha opened the envelope slowly, her hands still shaking. Inside was Richard's folded note and the matte black card he'd given her. Elegant, weighty, clearly exclusive. She began to speak, her voice soft but steady. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding. My husband—" But the manager waved a dismissive hand before the words could settle. "I've seen this trick before," she said loudly, addressing no one in particular, but making sure everyone could hear. "Fake cards, made-up husbands. They watch too many of those revenge movies." Laughter rippled from a young couple near the perfume counter. Another woman glanced up from her seat and shook her head, as if this kind of embarrassment was routine. Martha's heart thudded. She was not used to being the center of attention, especially not like this. Her cheeks were flushed, but she stood her ground. "I'm not here to cause trouble," she said, offering the card. "I was invited to—" The manager raised her voice again, speaking over her. "Security, please." From a hallway near the fitting rooms, 2 uniformed guards stepped into view. Neither looked alarmed, more inconvenienced. One glanced at the other with a sigh, as if this was beneath them. "What's going on?" he asked flatly. "She's disrupting business," the manager snapped, "claiming her husband owns the place. Can you escort her out?" Martha stared at the manager, blinking slowly. Her fingers tightened slightly around the envelope. The guards approached, one holding out a hand in what he probably thought was a calming gesture. "Ma'am, we don't want a scene. Let's just talk outside." Martha didn't resist. She nodded and took one small step back. Not because she was afraid, but because in her mind she could already hear Richard's voice, steady, sure, and ready. As the guards moved closer, the automatic. Doors behind her slid open again. Cold air rushed in. Footsteps, measured and firm, echoed against the marble floor. And then a man's voice rang out. "Is there a problem with my wife?" It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Everything stopped. One of the guards turned his head. The other lowered his arm. The manager blinked and took a half-step back, her eyes widening as she took in the tall figure walking toward them. Gray hair, tailored charcoal suit, a stillness in his eyes that made people listen. Martha looked up. Her face didn't change. She simply exhaled. Richard had arrived. Richard didn't raise his voice, didn't rush. He moved with the same quiet authority that had once turned around failing companies and sat calmly through shareholder storms. His presence alone seemed to change the temperature of the room. He walked past the stunned shoppers, past the gawking employees, and stopped beside Martha. Gently, he placed one hand at the small of her back, not possessive, just grounding. "His eyes never left the manager," I asked. He repeated evenly. "If there was a problem with my wife." The manager's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time since Martha entered the store, she looked unsure. She was being difficult," she stammered. "We didn't know she was with anyone." "She showed you my card," Richard said, his tone still level. "And a personal note." "She didn't mention your name," the manager added weakly, glancing at the guards for backup. But they stood still, arms crossed now, unwilling to move. Richard reached into the inner pocket of his suit and pulled out a sleek leather case. He opened it slowly and retrieved a silver-edged card, holding it between 2 fingers. He extended it toward the manager. "I'm Richard Jameson," he said, "owner of Greyhurst Holdings. You may know that name. We own this boutique chain. We also own this building, and the 4 luxury brands your commission depends on." A single cough echoed somewhere in the back. The manager stared at the card as if it were on fire. Her face drained of color. I didn't know," she whispered. "No," he replied calmly. "You chose not to ask." He turned slightly to face Martha. "Did she see your note?" Martha nodded once, still silent. "She dismissed you anyway?" Another nod. Richard took a breath and turned back to the manager. "Then here's what happens next. You'll step aside, now. Martha will shop for anything she pleases. If she wants the entire spring collection, you'll personally assist her. And afterward, you'll be replaced." The manager's lips parted, but no sound came. "Effective immediately," Richard added. Two regional staffers appeared suddenly, called in by someone, perhaps tipped off by a silent alert. One of them, a woman in a navy pantsuit with a corporate badge, quickly stepped forward and offered Martha a slight bow. "Mrs. Jameson," she said warmly, "we're so sorry. May we show you to the private salon?" The manager, now visibly shaking, backed away, her eyes locked on the floor. She tried to apologize, but the words fell flat. No one listened. Martha didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She simply glanced at Richard with a soft smile. "I'm all right," she said. "Really?" He nodded. "Then let's make this moment yours." And together, they followed the regional staff toward the velvet-curtained showroom, leaving behind a silence thick with stunned regret. Inside the private salon, the atmosphere shifted entirely. The harsh lights and skeptical stares of the boutique floor faded behind velvet curtains. Here, everything was soft, intentional, ivory carpet, crystal lighting, a tray of refreshments already prepared as if they'd been expected. Two personal stylists stood ready, eyes kind, posture respectful. Martha hesitated at first. She had never been pampered like this, not even on her wedding day. A young assistant offered her a seat and asked if she preferred tea or sparkling water. She chose water, her voice still quiet. Richard sat beside her, folding his hands. "I never meant for this to become a spectacle," Martha murmured. "I only came to choose something nice, something you'd be proud of." Richard reached for her hand. "Martha, I've been proud of you since the first time you corrected my grammar in that library 25 years ago." One of the stylists returned with an elegant display case, opening it to reveal an array of pearl necklaces, diamond pins, and soft silk scarves. "These are from our heritage collection," she said gently. "Timeless. We believe you might like something from here." Martha looked at the pieces, beautiful but bold. She ran her fingers gently along a simple pearl necklace with a gold clasp, then moved to a soft ivory scarf with embroidered edges. Her eyes rested on a slender bracelet made of braided silver and amethyst stones. It reminded her of something her mother once wore. She turned to Richard. "I don't want to overdo it." "You're not," he said. "You're honoring yourself." Meanwhile, beyond the salon, word had already begun to spread. Employees whispered, shoppers posted. The manager who had dismissed Martha was escorted out quietly. No ceremony, no protest. The boutique's internal leadership had issued a statement before the hour was up. "Zero tolerance for discrimination or judgment based on appearance," it said. But none of that concerned Martha now. She chose the bracelet. When the stylist wrapped it gently around her wrist, it fit perfectly, like it had waited years just to be worn by her. As she admired it, the corporate woman who had greeted them earlier returned, offering a gift bag, and with it, a sealed envelope. "Martha," she said, "Mr. Jameson has arranged for you to have lifetime access to our private collection, anytime, anywhere. And from this point forward, your name is on our legacy guest list." Martha's eyes widened, but she said nothing, just smiled softly. Then she stood. "I think I'm ready to go home," she said, and Richard, standing beside her, gave a gentle nod. "Home sounds perfect." They stepped back through the boutique, hand in hand. This time, no one laughed. No one looked away. Some even nodded respectfully. Have you ever been judged just by the way you looked? Share your story below. We're listening. The ride home was quiet but not heavy. As the car wound through Charleston's shaded streets, Martha leaned her head slightly against the window. The bracelet on her wrist caught slivers of sunlight. It didn't sparkle like the grand diamonds they had offered. It just shimmered, softly, like her. "I still can't believe it happened like that," she said finally, breaking the silence. "All I wanted was a simple moment to celebrate us." Richard looked over. And that's exactly what you gave us. A moment. A reminder. She turned to him. Of what? That dignity is quiet, he said, but louder than anyone shouting down a stranger. At home, the air smelled faintly of lavender and the late afternoon's warmth. Martha slipped off her shoes and stood in the kitchen, staring at the note he had left that morning. She picked it up again and held it longer this time. She wasn't angry at the manager. Not exactly, but she was changed. That evening, while Richard read on the porch, Martha took a small wooden box from the hallway closet. Inside were a few keepsakes, her mother's handkerchief, a pressed flower from their wedding bouquet, and a faded photograph of her as a young girl holding a book larger than her lap. She placed the bracelet inside the box next to the handkerchief, not to hide it, but to give it the honor it deserved. Later, as they sat together under the glow of porch lights and crickets hummed their familiar tune, Martha said, "You know, there's something else I want." Richard raised an eyebrow. "I want to take that story," she said, "and turn it into a lesson for the girls at the senior center. They think dressing up is silly. They think their stories don't matter anymore." He smiled. "Then remind them." The next morning, Martha arrived at the senior center, not in her usual cotton blouse, but wearing the ivory scarf and the bracelet. Her friends took notice. She told them what happened, not for pity, but for strength. "To be seen," she said, "has nothing to do with shine. It's how you carry yourself when others won't meet your eyes." And they listened. Because she wasn't just Martha, the quiet librarian, anymore. She was Martha Jameson, the woman who wore grace-like armor and had the courage to walk through shame without ever raising her voice. Over the next few weeks, the big story of what happened at the boutique spread further than Martha ever imagined, not because she shared it, but because others had seen. A video clip surfaced online, shaky and brief, capturing Richard's calm confrontation and the manager's frozen expression. It went viral in quiet corners of the internet, shared not for drama, but for dignity. But Martha stayed away from all of that. She wasn't interested in clicks or headlines. Her days returned to their rhythm. Morning walks in the garden, light chores, crossword puzzles by the window, and her weekly volunteer hours at the senior center. Yet something had shifted. People greeted her with a little more intention now. A neighbor who used to wave absent-mindedly stopped to chat about his grandkids. A teenage girl on the bus offered her seat with a shy smile, and at the senior center, her weekly reading circle grew twice as large. One afternoon, a new volunteer, a young woman studying fashion marketing, approached Martha nervously. "Mrs. Jameson, can I ask, were you the woman from that video? The one with the pearl bracelet and the husband who—" Martha gave her a warm smile. "That was me. But I'm still just a woman who prefers the garden to shopping malls." The girl laughed softly. "You changed something, though. People are talking. Even my professor brought it up in class." Martha looked down at her hands. The bracelet rested lightly on her wrist, her only nod to that day. "Then maybe it was worth it," she said. That night, she and Richard had dinner on the back porch, grilled, salmon, mashed sweet potatoes, and a bottle of the red wine they saved for special nights. As they ate, Richard looked at her with the same expression he'd worn on their wedding night, proud, calm, grateful. "I've built companies," he said, "negotiated billion-dollar deals, but nothing I've made has ever taught people more than what you did by simply standing there." Martha didn't answer right away. She looked up at the stars, their quiet shimmer barely visible through the city glow. "I didn't want to prove anything," she said. "I just didn't want to leave feeling small." "You didn't," Richard said. "You reminded everyone else how big Grace really is." And in that moment, surrounded by soft night air and the low hum of summer, Martha felt something rare. Not pride, not satisfaction, just peace. She didn't need a headline or a hero's arc. She had lived her truth, and it had spoken for itself. Month later, the boutique downtown reopened under new management. The windows gleamed brighter, the signage had changed, and a plaque near the entrance quietly read, "To every woman who has ever been underestimated, this space sees you now." The former manager never returned. No public statement, no apology, beyond corporate PR. But those who worked under her noticed the difference immediately. The new staff were trained to listen first, not judge. Kindness, once optional, became part of the brand. Martha never visited again. She didn't need to. Her legacy wasn't in the walls of that store, but in the hearts of the women she quietly inspired. At the senior center, a group of widows began a new project, the Second Bloom Society, a space where older women could swap stories, clothes, and courage. And every Tuesday, Martha was there, wearing her embroidered shawl, her soft sandals, and the bracelet that no one dared question anymore. When asked why she always looked so calm, she would simply smile and say, "Because I know who I am." And for the first time in a long time, the world knew too. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real stories of quiet strength and justice. And remember, true dignity doesn't raise its voice. It simply refuses to bow.